3 more days. If he didn't get it back, he wouldn't survive. He wrapped his coat tighter and followed the tracks through the snow. Past rusted machines and shattered glass buildings, deeper into the ruins, the storm grew louder, but he didn't stop. The footprints turned down a narrow alley between 2 half-buried metal structures. Jack slowed, heart racing. He shone the light ahead and saw a figure crouched behind a bent steel beam, breathing heavily. He raised his voice, not too loud. "Hey, I just want my food back. I won't hurt you." The figure jerked, ready to run. Jack stepped forward, raising his hands slowly. That's when he saw the face-wide eyes, pale skin with a soft bluish hue, thin antennae tucked against the head. It wasn't human. It was an alien child, trembling, holding the silver meal pack tightly to its chest. Jack froze. He had fought in the war. He had seen creatures like this from far away through his scope, but never this close, never so small and afraid. The child stared at him, panting, thin arms shaking from the cold. Jack noticed now this wasn't a thief. This was a starving child, scared out of its mind. "You hungry?" Jack asked gently, his voice softer. The child didn't answer, just clutched the meal tighter and stepped back. Jack sighed and lowered his flashlight, letting the beam fall to the snow. "I won't take it back," he said, surprising even himself. "But you shouldn't be out here alone." The child looked behind him nervously, then bolted into the shadows. Jack hesitated, then saw something strange. There were 2 sets of footprints in the snow. The small ones matched the child's, but the other set was dragged, uneven. Someone else had been with the child, someone who could barely walk. His instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a hungry thief. This was something more, something bigger. Jack followed the tracks deeper into the ruins, past fallen towers and quiet skeletons of machines that once hummed with life. The second trail led to an old maintenance station, half buried in snow and tilted from past explosions. The door was broken, and inside was darkness. Jack stepped in, light sweeping across broken furniture and piles of debris in one corner. Behind a wall of crates, he heard breathing shallow and weak. He moved closer, slowly. That's when he saw her, an adult female alien, lying still on the ground, skin pale, body thin. Wrapped in scraps of cloth, her face was tired, mouth slightly open. Her breathing was shallow. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Beside her, the child crouched again, holding the ration pack and whispering something in a strange tongue. The boy looked up, startled again to see Jack, but didn't run this time. Jack stood there, silent. The cold didn't bother him now. Not after what he was seeing. This child didn't steal for himself. He stole to save his mother. Jack looked down at the small, crumpled meal pack still in the boy's hands, his own stomach twisted, but not from hunger, from shame. He slowly stepped forward and placed his backpack on the ground. Unzipping it, he pulled out a heat pack and lit it with a match. The warmth spread fast. He placed it beside them and backed away. The child looked confused, but then dragged the heat pack toward his mother's side. Tucking it under her arm, Jack watched quietly, then turned and walked back to the door, pausing. "I've got more fire back at my place," he said softly. "If you want to follow me later, you can." He stepped outside into the snow, heart heavy, eyes stinging not from the wind, but from something else. He had come here to survive, alone, angry, prepared to fight over scraps. But what he found behind that child wasn't an enemy. It was something far more human than he expected. A son trying to save his dying mother in a world that had no more kindness left, and that broke his heart. Jack didn't go far that night. He returned to his shelter, but sleep didn't come. He sat by the heater, staring at the flickering flame, thinking of the boy's wide eyes and the sick woman lying on the cold floor. The child hadn't said a word, but everything in his body screamed one truth: fear and desperation. Jack had faced enemies in war, seen monsters in the battlefield, but this wasn't a battlefield. This was survival, raw and cruel. And the enemy wasn't a species, it was the cold, the hunger, the silence left behind by a broken world. He stared at the one remaining water tablet in his hand, his fingers tight around it. Then slowly, he placed it into a clean bottle and filled it with melted snow. Let it purify while he prepared something else: his old thermal blanket and one of his backup heat pads. He couldn't let them die out there, not like that. As the morning light crept over the icy landscape, Jack packed the supplies and followed the trail back to the ruined station. The snow had partially covered the tracks, but not completely. The two sets of footprints were still visible, the smaller ones dancing ahead, the larger ones dragging behind, clear signs of someone being supported or carried slowly, painfully. When Jack reached the half-buried station again, the door was still slightly open. He stepped inside, his boots crunching on ice and debris. A few snowflakes drifted in behind him as he crouched low and called out, "It's me again." There was no answer, just silence. Then, from the shadows, the child peeked out, eyes cautious but less wild than before. His small hands were red from the cold, cheeks chapped and raw. Jack didn't move closer. Instead, he slowly unzipped his pack and placed the water bottle and the heat pad on the ground. He also placed half of a nutrient bar and backed away. The boy stepped out and examined the items, slowly reaching for them like a frightened animal. Jack watched as he gave the water to his mother, whose breathing had grown even weaker. Her lips were cracked and her hands barely moved. "Her name?" Jack asked gently, not expecting an answer. The child paused, then whispered, "Myril." Jack nodded. "And you?" The boy hesitated, then pressed his hand to his own chest. "Nari." Jack felt something tighten in his throat. He had a name now. A name to the tiny shadow that had stolen his food. A name to the boy whose mother was dying alone in the snow. Nari poured the clean water into Myril's mouth, a few drops at a time. She blinked, weak but aware. Jack stepped back further, giving them space. He wasn't sure why he cared so much. He'd spent weeks keeping to himself, guarding every meal, every sip. And now he was giving it away to a pair of aliens he had once been trained to shoot on sight. Maybe it was the boy's eyes. Maybe it was because Jack had once been a son too. He stayed with them for an hour, then returned the next morning with more supplies. Each day he brought something: small water, fire packs, half rations, a cup of warm tea he made from dried leaves. Slowly, Myril's color returned, and she began to sit up, speaking softly in her own tongue. Nari always stayed close to her side, watching Jack with cautious eyes, but no longer afraid. One day, as Jack handed over a new blanket, he noticed deep scars along Myril's arm. Old wounds, burned and healed poorly. He didn't ask how she got them. He already guessed. She had been through more than just hunger. "What happened to your people?" Jack finally asked. Nari looked at him, then spoke in short, broken words. "Humans came with fire, took the others, Papa. Gone." Jack closed his eyes. The truth hit harder than the cold wind. He had believed the war was over, but clearly others had kept fighting, or worse, looting, killing the weak, stealing from survivors. He didn't know if the ones who attacked Neris Group were rogue soldiers or simple scavengers. But either way, it was clear they weren't heroes. And Jack had almost become like them, chasing a child over food, ready to take back his meal instead of asking why it had been taken. That night, as he sat by his heater, he pulled out a piece of paper and wrote something he hadn't written in months. Day 83. I gave away my last meal. Day 84. I found something better purpose. Myril and Nari didn't trust him fully. Not yet, but they didn't hide from him anymore. He would knock before entering now, leave supplies, offer a quiet word or two. Sometimes Nari would draw pictures in the snow, strange symbols or animals. Jack would try to guess, and the boy would giggle quietly, just for a moment, like he forgot they were in a world of ruins. But that peace wouldn't last forever, because one morning, Jack saw something that turned his blood-cold boot prints, large and deep, freshly pressed in the snow near the station. They weren't his. They weren't Naris. Someone else had been watching them. Someone had followed the signs of warmth, of fire, of food. And Jack knew he wasn't the only human left out here, but he might be the only one willing to protect instead of destroy, and that meant danger was coming, fast. The wind outside howled louder now, like it knew what was coming. Jack knelt just outside the ruined maintenance station, staring down at the deep, fresh boot prints in the snow. They were wide, heavy, made by someone tall and armed, likely more than one human boots, not alien feet. That meant survivors, but not the good kind, not anymore. He looked back toward the door, where Nari had just disappeared inside after collecting more firewood. The boy had grown a little stronger in the last few days. His cheeks were still sunken, his arms still thin, but he smiled now, even if just a little. And Myril, his mother, she could sit up now. She no longer looked like death itself. Thanks to Jack's food and heat rations. But if someone else found them? Jack stepped inside, brushing snow off his coat. Nari was already tending to a small fire in the corner, using scraps of old plastic and wood. Myril lay wrapped in layers of old fabric, her eyes closed, but her chest moving steadily. He looked at them both for a long moment, then knelt near Nari. "Listen, kid," Jack said, voice low. "Someone's out there, human, maybe more than one. You understand?" Nari stared at him, wide-eyed, bad humans. Jack gave a slow nod. "Maybe, so we have to be careful, very careful." The boy nodded once, serious now. Jack gave him a small nod of approval, then turned to Myril. Her eyes opened, slowly. Her face was lined with quiet strength and pain. He tried speaking gently. "You're not safe here. Not anymore. Someone is tracking us. You can come back with me. There's a better place, safer." Warmer, she blinked, then whispered, "No." More running. Her voice was rough, but her words were clear. She looked over at Nari, then at Jack. "You helped us when no one else would." Jack was surprised she could speak his language at all. "I only did what I could," he said quietly. She shook her head slowly. "No. Most would let us die. You shared your fire." There was silence between them, not awkward, but heavy with meaning. Then she added, "He's all I have left." Jack nodded. "I know. That night, he helped them pack what little they had. He wrapped Myril in thick layers and used an old hovercart. Now powerless as a sled, Nari helped push as Jack pulled. They moved slowly through the snow, taking back alleys and broken tunnels, avoiding open ground, avoiding the tracks of the strangers who had come too close. It took 3 hours to reach Jack's shelter. The entrance was narrow, hidden under fallen rubble and a rusted satellite dish. Inside, it wasn't much metal walls, a single heater, a few crates of supplies, but it was clean, dry, and hidden. Myril sighed as she lay on the bedroll Jack had made for her. Nari clung to her side, whispering in their language. Jack handed them both warm water, then sat by the door, shotgun on his lap. Eyes alert. The next morning, things felt different. Not peaceful, but tense. Jack noticed how Myril looked around the shelter carefully, her eyes stopping on every corner, every crack in the wall. It was the look of someone who had lived in fear too long, who didn't trust peace when it came. Because peace was usually followed by pain, she spoke to Jack while Nari slept, my mate. He died saving us. We were in a convoy. There were other families, humans attacked. Jack didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let her pour the pain out. Her voice was quiet, broken, but full of fire. They said they wanted food, tech, power. Cells. They took everything. Then they took the men, lined them up, shot them. Her voice caught for a second. My son didn't cry. He just held my hand. Pulled me away in the dark. Jack swallowed hard. I'm sorry. She looked at him. Tears in her eyes. You're the first to say that. He didn't know what to say after that, so he kept watch, staring at the snow outside. Heart full of emotions he didn't know how to name. Anger, guilt, something like shame. That night, while Neri slept beside his mother, Jack sat near the door with his weapon. The storm had calmed, but the cold still bit through the cracks. Suddenly, a faint sound made him freeze. A crunch, then another. Someone was stepping outside, slowly, carefully, too heavy to be Nari, too sure to be lost. Jack killed the lantern. Grabbing his shotgun, he peeked through the sliver of a broken panel near the door. A shape moved across the snow-broad shoulders. Dark coat, a rifle slung across the back. There was more than one. He saw a second figure behind the first. Talking in low voices, Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He stepped back from the door. Then looked over at Myril and Nari, both sleeping silently. This shelter had been his quiet place, his grave, if needed. Now, it had become a battlefield, but he wasn't running. Not anymore. Jack stayed perfectly still, his breath slow and quiet. Just like in the old days when patience meant survival. Through the narrow opening in the wall, he watched the two strangers outside. They weren't lost wanderers, not dressed like that. Not moving like that. They had gear-clean rifles, power gloves, and thick survival coats with metal stitching, scavenger gear, military leftovers. Maybe ex-soldiers, maybe raiders. But they were too quiet, too careful. That meant something worse. Professionals. Jack leaned back, gripping the shotgun tight. He had been a soldier once. He knew what trained eyes looked like, and these men. They were scanning for movement, following heat traces. Probably saw the footprints leading here. The man in front pointed at the rubble near the entrance and nodded. The second man stepped forward slowly, pulling a long knife from his belt. Not to fight, but to cut away fabric or traps. They were preparing to enter. Inside, Jack moved fast but silent. He reached the back of the shelter and tapped Myril on the shoulder gently. She opened her eyes, instantly alert, not panicking. Just breathing fast. Her instincts were sharp, even half sick, he whispered. Danger outside, 2 men, armed. You and the boy stay here. No sound. Myril looked at her sleeping son. Then at Jack and gave a slow nod. Jack turned and crouched near the door. His mind racing. He had only a shotgun, 2 shells left, a flare gun, and a few knives. If they entered together, he wouldn't survive. But if he split them, a sudden clang outside. The first man had kicked a metal sheet by accident. Jack used that sound as a distraction. He opened the back panel of the shelter silently, slipping out into the freezing dark, circling behind the 2 figures. He crouched behind a rusted generator, snow crunching lightly under his boots. He waited, watching them argue about the blocked entrance. Then Jack moved, quick, silent. He stepped behind the second man and jammed the butt of his shotgun into the man's neck, dropping him hard into the snow before he could cry out. The first man spun around, but too late. Jack fired. The blast echoed through the ruins. The man dropped with a shout, not dead, but bleeding from the leg. Jack rushed in, kicked the rifle away, and pointed the shotgun at his face. Talk, he growled. Why are you here? The man groaned, holding his thigh. blood soaking the snow. Shelter, heat signature. We followed it. Thought maybe it was unguarded. We just wanted supplies. Don't lie to me, Jack snapped. Pressing the gun closer, you followed. Them, the kid and the woman. The man spat. Aliens, yeah. We saw them first. They belong to the wild now. Not worth wasting food on. Jack felt his blood boil. You would have killed them, like the others. They're not our kind. The man sneered, not human, not worth the rations. Jack stepped back, disgusted. You're lucky I don't finish this now. The man growled. You'll regret it. There are others. They'll come looking for us. Jack raised the flare gun. Good. Let them come. He fired the flare into the sky. A blinding red light exploded above the ruins. Bathing the snow in color, it was a message, one of warning, not help. This shelter is protected. Back inside, Myril held Nari tightly. The boy awake now, eyes full of fear. But when Jack stepped back in, weapon still smoking, face covered in frost and fury, Nari whispered something to his mother. She translated, he says, "You look like a warrior again." Jack didn't smile, but he nodded once. No one touches you. Not while I'm here. That night, he buried the second man and left the wounded one with supplies and a warning. Tell your friends this sector is dead, nothing here but cold and ghosts. He returned to the shelter. Exhausted, the wind howled again. But now it sounded different. Not like a beast, but like a wall breaking, like something opening. Nari ran to him and handed him a warm cup of water with shaky hands. Jack drank it slowly, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel alone. Later, Myril spoke again, her voice soft. Why help us? We're not your kind. Jack stared into the fire. Because being human isn't about the species. It's about what you choose to do when no one else is watching. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight, and said something in her language. Jack didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He had earned something more than thanks that night. He had earned trust. The snowstorm returned 2 days later, colder, louder, sharper than before. The wind screamed across the ruins like a warning. Jack reinforced the shelter's walls with metal scraps and old cloth, patching every gap he could find. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would hold. For now, inside, the heater buzzed faintly, working overtime. Nari curled near it like a cat, reading through an old children's book Jack had found in the wreckage of a school. He couldn't read every word, but he studied the pictures carefully, whispering the names of animals as he memorized them. Jack watched him with a tired smile, sipping a hot drink made from boiled snow and dried roots. Across the shelter, Myril rested on her side, looking stronger each day. Her cheeks had some color again, and her breathing no longer wheezed, but the peace was thin, like glass under pressure. Jack knew the flare he had launched didn't just scare off those two men. It sent a message too. Anyone nearby, someone still lives here. That meant more eyes, more ears, more threats, and food. Food was nearly gone. He sighed, setting down his cup. We can't stay here forever. Myril raised her head slightly. Where will you go? Jack shrugged. There's a transport station 10 miles west. Might be broken, but maybe that comes. Still work. If I can get a signal out, someone could come. Maybe a ship. Maybe a better place than this frozen graveyard. Myril was silent for a long time, then said softly, You'll leave us behind. Jack looked surprised. What? No, I'd never do that. Her eyes studied him carefully. You've already done more than most humans would ever do. You don't owe us anything. Jack shook his head slowly. That's not how it works. Not for me. I didn't just save your lives. You gave me something too. Something I didn't know I needed. Myril raised a brow. What's that? Jack glanced at Nari, who was now pretending to make animal sounds from the book. "Family," he said simply. "A reason to wake up and keep fighting." Not just for myself. Silence filled the shelter. But it wasn't empty. It was heavy with emotion and spoken things they both felt but hadn't said. Finally, Myril looked down, then whispered, "If you leave to find help, I'll go with you." Jack blinked. "You're still recovering." "It's too dangerous," she cut him off. Her voice firm. "I've survived worse. If I stay behind, I'll always be waiting. Fearing you won't return, but if we go together, we have a chance." Together. Jack looked at her, then at the boy, who now looked up at both of them with wide, curious eyes. He sighed. "All right then, we go as a unit." The next day, Jack pulled out his last food rations and split them into thirds. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He gave the best portion to Nari, without telling him, and started building a small sledge to carry gear and Myril when she needed rest. They left early, wrapped in thick coats and layers of cloth. Nari rode on the sledge beside his mother, and Jack led the way through the snow-covered ruins. It was slow but steady. Jack had memorized every turn, every wrecked structure, every safe path through the ice fields. But halfway through the journey, things changed. A shadow moved ahead. Jack froze, raising a hand. Myril pulled Nari close behind the sledge. Jack crept forward and peered around the edge of a collapsed tower. It wasn't a person, it was a drone old Earth-made, still active, scanning for heat signatures. It hovered low, its blue light sweeping across the snow, searching for survivors or targets. Jack swore under his breath. Military cleanup unit, they're still patrolling. He had two choices: run and risk being seen, or stay and freeze. He crawled back and whispered, "We wait." No sound, no movement. Let it pass. Minutes dragged on like hours. The drone hovered nearby, then slowly drifted away, disappearing. Into the white horizon, Jack exhaled and signaled them forward. They moved again, faster now. They couldn't afford another close call by the time they reached the transport station. The sky had darkened, and snow had begun to fall again. Jack climbed the broken tower first, pulling open the frozen metal door with a grunt. Inside, it was dark but dry. A flicker of light from a dead console still blinked. He moved fast, clearing the space for Myril and Nari, starting a fire, checking the comms panel. Myril helped where she could, adjusting wires with careful fingers. She wasn't a soldier, but she was clever, precise. Jack finally sat down, exhausted, and looked at her. "Tomorrow I'll try the signal booster. If it works, we might have a rescue ship here in a week." Myril nodded slowly. "And if it doesn't work?" Jack looked her in the eyes. "Then we keep moving. We survive, because now we're not alone anymore." That night, Nari curled up between them under a shared blanket. Jack stared at the flickering firelight on the wall, thinking about how it all began with one stolen meal. He smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks. He didn't lose anything that day. He gained everything. The blizzard struck in the middle of the night, without warning. Jack woke to the sound of the old tower groaning, wind smashing against its side like hammers. Snow howled through every crack, turning the station into a frozen drum. Myril pulled Nari close, shielding him with her body, while Jack threw more scraps into the fire to keep it alive. Visibility outside dropped to nothing. Jack couldn't even see the doorway from the console. But the worst part wasn't the storm itself, was what came with it. A red light blinked on the comm panel. Motion sensors triggered. Jack's heart skipped. He rushed to the panel, wiped the frost off the screen. The external camera was blurry, half covered in ice, but he could make out shapes. 3 of them, large, moving slowly through the storm. Not animals, humans, armed, walking in formation. One of them carried a scanner. Waving it in a slow arc, they were tracking heat. Jack backed away from the screen and grabbed his shotgun. They found us. Myral stood quickly, her eyes sharp. Nari clung to her leg, shivering. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. Jack scanned the room, thinking fast. "We defend this place. This is the only building standing for miles. They'll try to take it. We can't let them in," he handed Nari a small radio with a red button. "If I tell you, you press this, okay? It sends out a pulse scrambles trackers for a minute. Might confuse them, might give us time." Nari nodded bravely, gripping it tightly. Jack moved fast, setting up traps with tripwire and metal shards at the entrance tunnel. He reinforced the door with a rusted beam and stacked crates behind it. Myral helped, never complaining, never hesitating. Then, silence. Only the wind, until bang. The door shook once. Then again, a muffled voice came through, distorted by the storm. "We know you're in there. Open up, and no one gets hurt." Jack stayed quiet. He positioned himself behind the crates. Shotgun ready, Myral crouched low, gripping a jagged blade Jack had given her earlier. The door burst inward. Smoke filled the room. A flash grenade rolled and Jack kicked it back just in time. It exploded outside, followed by shouting. The trap went off. One man screamed, metal slicing into his leg. Then came the real fight. A figure rushed in with a rifle, but Jack fired. First, the blast knocking him down hard. Another man followed. Myral was faster. She struck from the side, slashing his arm. He yelled and dropped his weapon. Falling back, the last raider hesitated, seeing his squad broken. He shouted something and fled into the snow, disappearing into the storm. It was over in seconds, but felt like hours. Blood stained the doorway. Smoke curled into the cold air, and the wind began to quiet outside. Jack stood over the two fallen bodies, panting. His shoulder was bleeding just a graze. Myral had a cut on her cheek. Nari was crying, but safe. Jack knelt and hugged the boy tightly. "You did great. It's over now. They're gone." Myral sat beside them, placing her hand gently on Jack's arm. "You protected us." Again, Jack nodded. "We protect each other. That's how we survive." The next morning, the storm had passed, and sunlight broke through the clouds. Jack dragged the bodies outside, burying them beneath snow and stone. He scavenged what gear he could: rations, ammo, 2 working rifles, a thermal lens. Myral helped clean the shelter, and Nari drew on the walls with a bit of coal, sketching a picture of the 3 of them standing together, holding hands under a rising sun. Jack looked at it and felt something shift inside him. Something old, something soft, something he thought the war had taken from him forever. Hope. Later that day, he climbed the tower again and activated the signal booster. Static filled the comm line. Then a voice crackled through. ... This is Echo Base, Sector Delta Nine, receiving distress beacon. Please respond. Jack nearly dropped the mic. He pressed the button, voice trembling. "This is Survivor Unit 3's souls. Requesting evac, hostile territory, coordinates. Transmitting now." There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "Copy that. Evac ship en route. 8 to 3 days, hold your position." Jack smiled for the first time in days. He climbed back down and looked at Myral and Nori. "We're getting out of here." Myral didn't speak, but she smiled warm and real. Nari jumped up and hugged Jack around the waist. 3 more days of waiting. 3 more days together. Jack didn't care how long it took, because now he had something worth protecting, and he'd die before letting anyone take it away. The next 3 days passed slowly, filled with tension, cold and quiet moments that felt heavier than silence. Jack took turns keeping watch while Myril tended to Nara's minor wounds and comforted him with soft songs in her language. Even in the middle of broken concrete and snow, her voice sounded warm. The radio crackled every few hours, confirming the evac ship was still on course, still fighting its way through dangerous skies and broken navigation systems. Jack had to keep the signal clear using old wires and luck. But it gave them hope. Hope was a strange feeling for Jack. It felt both sharp and soft, like waking from a long sleep and realizing you're not alone anymore. One evening, while the fire crackled and Nari slept curled between old coats, Myril sat beside Jack, watching the smoke rise toward the roof. She didn't speak for a long time, then asked, "What happens after they come?" Jack looked at her, caught off guard. "They take us somewhere better, somewhere warm, safe." She nodded slowly, her eyes lowered. "And after that?" He hesitated, unsure what she meant. "What do you mean?" Myril turned toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do we part ways? Do you go back to your world and we to ours?" Jack opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He hadn't thought about that part. He'd been so focused on survival, on keeping them safe, that the thought of losing them afterward hadn't hit him until now. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just an alien woman, but a mother, a survivor, someone who had seen death and still chose kindness, someone who had trusted him, even when she had every reason not to. "No," Jack said softly, "we don't part ways, not unless you want to, but I'd rather stay together." Myril's eyes glistened in the firelight, "even if the others don't understand." Jack gave a small smile. "Then they'll have to learn, because this right here, this is more human than anything I've seen in years." That night, no one said another word. But something shifted between them. Not just survival partners, not just protector and protected, something like family, like home. On the third morning, the sky split open with a loud hum. Jack rushed outside, eyes squinting against the sudden light. A ship, a real one, descended slowly, its thrusters kicking up snow and ash. It was a rescue vessel from Echo Base, painted white and blue, old but strong. As the landing gear touched down, a ramp lowered, two humans in winter suits stepped out, weapons drawn, scanning the area cautiously. Jack raised his hands and called out, "We're the survivors, 3 of us. I'm sending them out now." Myril and Nari stepped out slowly. Nari clung to her hand, half hiding behind her. The soldiers paused for a second, clearly surprised by the sight of a human standing protectively beside 2 aliens. But they didn't speak. The commander stepped forward, visor lifted, revealing a scarred face and tired eyes. "You the one who sent the signal?" Jack nodded. "Name's Jack Harper, former combat engineer. These 2 are Myril and her son, Nari. They're survivors, refugees. They're with me." The commander looked at the alien woman, then at the child, then at Jack. "They armed?" Jack shook his head. "Only with courage." There was a pause, and then the commander lowered his weapon slightly. "Get them aboard. We'll check them during flight. If you vouch for them, we won't question it." Jack helped Myril and Nai into the ship, guiding them gently up the ramp. Inside, the warmth was shocking, real heat, clean walls, the smell of food. Nari looked around with wide eyes, whispering, "It smells like stars." Jack laughed, his heart light. "Yeah, kid, it really does." They were given blankets, food and water. A medic checked their vitals and nodded approvingly. "They're lucky. Whatever you did out there saved their lives." Jack sat beside Myril as the ship lifted off, the ruined outpost shrinking beneath them. He watched it disappear. That frozen world where everything started, where he almost died of starvation and solitude, where a boy stole his last meal and gave him everything in return. As the stars filled the windows and the engines hummed like lullabies, Nari leaned against Jack's arm and whispered, "Can I stay with you?" Always. Jack looked at Myrtle, who gave a small nod, her eyes soft. If you'll have us, Jack's throat tightened. He rested a hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered back, "You're already mine, kid. Both of you." And in that moment, with war and loss behind them and an uncertain future ahead, a new truth settled in Jack's chest. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a father, a protector, a human who chose kindness over cruelty, and in return found a home not in a place, but in two hearts he never expected to love. And all of it because someone once took his last meal.